Hello guys, this is Siren with Offensive Security and welcome to another walkthrough. Today we're going to be working on a machine called Craft. It's available from Offensive Security's Proving Grounds, moreover the PG Practice tab. So it is a Windows machine, and I think personally that it demonstrates some important concepts that would be worth sharing. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that. I'm just going to switch my source over to the streaming, and I'll show you. I already have the IP here. We're just going to copy the IP from Proving Grounds, move it over to Cherry Tree, and I'll paste it as plain text. There we go. We're also going to export this as an environment variable within our terminal. So I got my IP there, and now if we echo IP with the $sign in front, we are ready to go with tooling, cross-tooling, and such. You'll see I've already set up a file for hashes, users, 2 directories for vulnerabilities, any files retrieved or exfiltrated. But with no further ado, let's go ahead and do some nmapping. nmap-p- for all 65,535 ports. We're going to do -sc for simple scripts and -sv for service version. I'm going to do that on the target IP and tack on a --open. And what the --open will do is it'll tell nmap that we're really only interested in open ports, not filtered, not closed, and it will speed up the full port scan. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it looks like it's saying it's blocking our probes. May want to try PN. Alright then, let's go ahead and tack on a PN and let that go. So I'll be back. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. We're going to blip through time, and we're going to get our nmap output, and we're going to get it into Cherry Tree and take a look at what we have. Okay, so we're back, and our nmap scan has completed, and to our surprise, only port 80 is open. So if we're getting into this machine, it's going to be through port 80. Let's go ahead and still get that over into the nmap results section of our notes, and let's start taking a look. So 80 HTTP, looks like Apache 2448, nothing crazy there, but we have Win64. OpenSSL 1.1.1, that's a little suggestive. But nonetheless, we're going to put up here that our web technology is PHP, because that's what we found here, PHP 8.0.7, and that the target machine is Win64. So I don't know exactly what we have, but I know that we have a Windows 64-bit OS, and that is enough to go from there. And then the title of the machine, Craft. So I've already got Burp Suite open. I also have Firefox. I'm going to go ahead and grab the IP address. I'll clear this out now that we've stored it. Let's echo the IP, copy it, load it into Firefox, and let's just see what's on port 80. Let's just see what we got. Once it decides to load. Oh no, wait. I just plugged in my IP. I am so silly. So what we're going to do is grab this IP. I'm sorry. But what we're going to do is plug in the target machine's IP, and we'll see where that goes. You'll have to excuse me. But that is the target IP, though. No, I echoed it out, right? Yeah, it's just taking a little while. Okay. So I didn't do it wrong. It's just taking its time. Let's take a look at burp. Maybe we have proxy enabled. So this is something you want to be aware of, right? Make sure when you start up burp that your intercept is off. Now let's see. And there it is. Cough, cough. So what we're going to do is notice down here at the very bottom. Obviously we have a very let's see, craft, Lateral ipsum, so not suggestive of too much custom content. I don't see that we'll be generating our own word list. There's not even port 20 or 22 or any SSH services. There's no remote shell services or secure shell services available to us, nor RDP. We do have admin at craft.offsec, but I'm thinking the thing here is this. It says, join our team, submit your resume. So it says pick a file and upload. I'm just going to test this. I'm going to test with the text file. That goes, Siren was here. Out to, let's just put it in my documents as testing.text. And we'll go back to Firefox, browse, and we're going to go to our documents. We're going to upload that file that we just created, the text document. Open it, and we're going to submit that post data. File is not valid. Please submit an ODT file. Let me enlarge the font size so our viewers can see that more clearly, more legible. But please submit an ODT file. So an ODT file, for those that are not aware, is associated with LibreOffice. Now, the thing that I'm thinking here is, what if we just make a default kind of ODT file and we give that a submit and see what happens? So I'm going to clear this out, and that is going to mean that you're going to need LibreOffice on your machine. So to install it on your machine, we would apt-get and install-yes LibreOffice Writer. Now, I already have this installed. Mine's already installed, but that is what you would need to move forward with this walkthrough. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and just open a new terminal here, bring it down. We're going to type LibreOffice, and let's launch it. So you can see I got a few documents here. Security matters. We're going to open a new writer document. And you know what? Thank you, LibreOffice, for the tip. But we're doing a recording right now. So we're going to go to Tools, Macros, and the reason I want to do this, let me just explain the reasoning behind this. Join our team, submit your resume. My guess is that this machine is meant to simulate somebody in an internal environment. And this is important, guys. In an internal environment, opening a document, right? And we can only I could send an ODT document over there and upload that just fine. The problem is nothing is going to happen. So we're going to have to do a few fancy things. And we're going to go to Tools, Macros, and Organize Macros, Basic. And I'm kind of just going to leave this as untitled. You can do whatever you like with it. But on the right side here, we're going to click New. I'll call this OffSec 1. And we'll click OK. So this is kind of very reminiscent of what, might be Visual Basic. We might recognize that as Visual Basic. So something I want to do, a good way to test if a document is being opened or has been opened is just with PowerShell, actually. Excuse me, I had to cough. But what we're going to do is just tab out, and we're going to type shell. So everything inside here is going to be a shell command. And let's say cmd/c, that's going to denote the command. And we're going to say PowerShell, IWR. But we're going to need our IP address this time. So we're going to ifconfig on ton 0. And I'm going to grep-i inet. And we're going to grab this, copy it. This is our VPN IP. So we're going to jump back to LibreOffice, and it is really just this simple. What this is going to do is perform a HTTP request just to our IP, and if we're hosting on port 80 by default, then, and this is open, then it should execute. There is something else we're going to need to do. We're going to need to go to File and save the document, and we'll call this OffSec1 and hit the Save button. We're going to close out of this. And let's jump back into LibreOffice. And you do want to make sure you save this document as well. But we're not just finished just yet. There's something else we're going to need to do. We're going to need to attach the macro or the script or the code that we just made to an event that pertains to the document. Thankfully, we can do that. What we're going to do is go back to Tools. We're going to go down to Customize. And over here under the Events tab, we're going to click on Open Document and click on the macro button. And then here is our offsec1.odt. I'm going to double click that. Standard, double click that, expand that tree, and then we have our macro name. It's just, it was a main function, so macro name is main. But we've titled that offsec1. We're going to hit OK. And now notice what happens. Open document is assigned an action. It's assigned an action. So many complex documents out there for various organizations are going to have complex Excel spreadsheets, Word documents that have charts, are pulling down real-time data, you know, really big stuff. So this functionality is fairly standard, quite frankly. But open document, and that's going to pertain to the launching of our code, which has a PowerShell command which is going to connect to our target or our attacking machine on port 80, if all goes well. I would imagine that's the point of the machine. We have a hint that the name of the machine is craft, and we can only upload one type of document. Now, could we certainly intercept this in burp and try and change it over to a PHP extension for file upload vulnerabilities? We certainly could, but I'm going to try for the sake of time to keep us on track. So once this is done, I'm going to make sure to save my document. There we go. We're going to hop back to Firefox. Actually, we're going to go back here. We're going to go back to our terminal, and I am going to say python-m simple HTTP server on port 80. And now we're listening on any port 80. So I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to hit the browse button. And there's our offsec1.odt document. We're going to hit open. And let's see what happens if we upload this. Your resume was submitted. It will be reviewed shortly, by our staff. So the staff is going to take a look at our resume very shortly. And there we go. So somebody just opened our document, and we have a get to /, and that was a code 200. So now we know we have execution on the target machine in the event that somebody opens this document, which they certainly have. They probably think it's buggy or something because, you know, there's no content in it. They probably just closed out. But we're going to go ahead and do something a little different. This time around, we're going to make a new document. So I'm just going to close out of LibreOffice. I'm going to reopen it from scratch, guys, from scratch. And we're going to go just as we did, writer document. We're going to go to Tools, Macros, Organize Macros, Basic. Down here, we're going to expand this. We're going to say New, and we're going to call this offsec2. Hit the OK button. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. Not too much different. Nothing really too different here. We're still going to be calling upon the shell here. And we're going to still be using PowerShell. So we're going to say cmd-c or /c. And that command is going to be PowerShell, same as it was IWR. And we're going to need our IP address again on port 80. So let me just hop back here. If config on ton 0. Copy this. Hop back to Libre. And if we put this in here on port 80, then we're going to be good to go. But what my point is with this is that we can now retrieve files. Okay? We can now retrieve files. So for the time being, I'm kind of just going to put this on hold. I want you to put this on hold. And we're going to just hit up Google for a moment. And then basically what we're going to do is Google for invoke PowerShell. Here it is, TCP one-liner. And you can see we have a GitHub here, yeah? And we're just going to open this up in raw. And we're going to copy over this code. Everything through here. Let's copy all of that. Everything for the client. And that should work. I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this. And this time, get this, we're going to touch offsec.ps1. Now we're going to nano offsec.ps1. And much like with any other rev shells or things like that, much like any other rev shell commands, PowerShell is really no different here. We're going to be replacing the hard-coded IP address with our own attacking machine. So if config on 0, we're going to grab our inet address, and I'm going to be listening on port 9090 for a reverse shell. Let's see if there's anywhere else we need to put that. Scrolling along. No, that looks good. And there it is. So I'm going to exit out of this one. And basically the idea is that we're going to have the target machine is going to open our document. It's going to trigger a macro, which is going to call upon PowerShell. PowerShell is going to essentially connect an output similar to wget, very similar to wget. It's going to connect, and we're going to output our file to a known writable location for Windows 64-bit. And kind of cross our fingers on that one. I think this will make a lot more sense once we get down to the nitty-gritty. So what I'm going to do is throw up a simple HTTP server again, python-m for module, and we're going to call on simple HTTP server, an argument of port 80. I'm also going to establish a netcat listener ahead of time in a separate terminal, and we're going to say we want that to listen for -n. It's going to be numeric IP, LVP on 9090, so listen verbosely on port 9090. Good. So we have this ready for retrieval and this ready for our shell. We're already ready to go. The problem is we need to go ahead and head back to the document. You can see I got ahead of myself earlier, but at least we're ahead of the game. So let's go back to our macros. I think I actually have it open. Yep, sure do. So this time on port 80 /, you guessed it, what we're going to get at is offsec.ps1. Just like wget or something, we're going to provide -o as an output format. And we're going to say output to C, Windows, temp, tasks. Let's go to tasks and offsec.ps1. But we're not done just yet. That's just going to do, that's just going to essentially download and output what we're hosting here, our PowerShell script, our PowerShell reverse shell. So we're going to need to actually execute that, as you guessed, and that's going to take another shell command, so cmd, close the parentheses, and we're going to say PowerShell. I'm sorry for anybody who finds this hard to read. I find it hard to read. I just can't find a way to actually increase the font size inside of LibreOffice. It's ridiculous for legibility. So that's kind of while I'm reading this out here. We have cmd /c PowerShell. And this time we're just going to go ahead and call upon it and say execute, so -c. And we're going to go, we say we put that in Windows tasks and offsec.ps1. Let's review our code here. It looks good to me. Looks good to me. So we're going to go ahead and hit File. Then we're going to click Save, just as we did before. This time we're going to call it offsec2. We're going to save that and close out of this Visual Basic Editor. And we still need to do one thing. We need to go to Tools and Customize so that when, human resources or whatever it is opens the document, cough, cough, well, I think you get where this is going. So we're going to find the Open Document event. And we're going to find it. Let's see, it's even hard for me to read. Document. Open document. Where are you? There you are. Open document. Probably people screaming, "Siren, it's right there." Then we're going to click macro. We're going to go back down, double click, offset tune. We're going to select our macro. And you see now, assigned action to this event is going to be to execute our macro. We're going to hit OK. We're going to go to File, and we're going to save the document. Wonderful. So I'm going to close out of this, and let's hop back to Firefox. Let's go back to the main index page, the web root, and we're going to click on Browse this time. Select offset2.odt, and hopefully HR is kind this time around, and they reopen it, just because it was just a hiccup the first time around. It's just a hiccup. We're going to hit upload. Now, assuming everything goes well, I think you see how this is going to work. We're going to have a get to here, and then we should get a reverse shell, guys. There it is. Offsec.ps1. Let's see if they open the document. It doesn't look like it. Let's review something. So I've unpaused here. I had to figure out what was wrong. Sure enough, when I made the PS1 file, I found that there was a new line. You really want to make sure that this is all on one line and that there's no trailing spaces with your PS1 file. And if you save that out, and then we exit this, let's go ahead and try and re-upload that now. So if you're wondering why it's not working on your end, just make sure that the payload is very clean. That's something we want to always check. So let's browse offsec2.odt, hit upload, and now we should get a get, and let's see what happens. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, you can never ask me, but you can always ask me, I should say. We're just going to wait. Hello! So it got it immediately and connect to, and if I'm correct, if I type something like dir, yeah, we're in business. We are in business, and we have a shell on the remote machine. How nice is that? That's pretty cool. So now we have a shell on the machine, and we're going to need to do a little bit of exploration. We need to start doing some Windows post-exploitation enumeration. See, we have Java, XAMPP, Windows 10 upgrade. Let's take a look at who I am first. Let's type who am I. It says I'm the cyber geek. So let's do net users and take a little closer look at what's going on. We have an administrative user, guest, default, all the defaults. And then we have Apache, which is pretty interesting. Let's run net user, the cyber geek, and let's see who we are here. Are we a member of admin? No, we're not. We're just users, nothing special. What about net user Apache? Still just a member of users. So we might be able to do privesc as the Apache user, but I just want to gather a bit of information. So let's type like sys system info. Let's let that go. This is all the type of stuff that you would just generally check out, like which patches are installed, which are not, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and do, who am I? /all. Okay, checking for things here, NT authority, authenticated users, mandatory groups, anything special, reboot privs, anything like that. Not particularly. Is wmic present on the machine? Sure enough is. So if we wanted to start enumerating out services, checking for bin paths, unquoted bin paths and things like that, we could certainly do that with things like wmic and icalcs. But let's do a little bit of manual. We have xampp program files. Let's check program files. cd program files. Okay, so there's LibreOffice. That makes sense. NSSM 2.24. VMware makes sense. Okay, so NSSM we could definitely take a look at in a bit. Let's see. Program files, x86. And nothing too exotic standing out here. Nothing too exotic at all. Let's go to our desktop. Is there anything maybe on there, like a link file or something? Desktop. Well, there's a local flag, so awesome there. And let's check out, can we write to this location? Echo write test out to, let's just call it write test.txt. And no, so we don't have privileges to really write anything. Fortunately for us, I do know of a location that we can write. And putting some pieces together that we have the Apache user here, we might be able to do something similar to what we did before to retrieving a shell. But we're going to need, in essence, let's take a look at xampp. So one thing we could do is we could go to htdocs, and let's see if we have write privileges here. Let's echo write test out to data. And we do type data. Okay, so we certainly can. That means what we could do, in essence, since Apache is here and the Apache user is present, we might be able to get some escalation and move laterally on this Windows machine to another user and then escalate vertically to something, well, greater. The problem is if I were to echo out, like PHP system $get CMD, that it would not be running, and then, we could place this as cmd.php, and this would essentially be the web root, right? Here's our index.php and upload. We could then do that. The problem is that wouldn't be executed by Apache. So what we're going to need to do is something a little different. Let's bring back our other shell here. Cool thing about Terminator, for those who asked on LinkedIn and such, I actually use Terminator, not tmux. But we're going to close out of this and we're going to touch cmd.php. We are going to nano cmd.php. I'm going to put this in preserve statements so we can preserve spacing, and that'll just make things more legible if we go through the web browser. Then we'll say system, go ahead and execute basically the result of our get parameter cmd, and that's really it. That's really all we need. The idea here is that we're going to need this to essentially be executed by the Apache user. So I'm going to save this, and we are not entirely out of luck. We don't actually have to go and re-upload a document now. We have a legitimate shell on the target machine, and it would be silly of us to do that. But we do need to grab our IP on the ton0 interface. We're going to copy that, and we're going to do python-m, you guessed it, simple HTTP server on port 80. And let's go ahead and PowerShell IWR HTTP, paste in our IP on port 80 /cmd.php, and dash output that to, well, we could dash output that, would that be backslashes? Yeah, let's do /HT or xampp, XAMPP, yep, /HT docs, and then we'll output that as cmd.php. And we got it there, so there's our get 200, perfect. And there's our cmd.php. Wonderful. So now let's verify if our theory is correct, that if we have something here, that's basically how we can do file transfer, guys, is what I'm getting across. That's how we can do some file transfer without having to re-go through the document or anything like that. We got a 200 okay on that one. But what we're going to do is hop back to the web browser. Let's blow it up here. And let's see if our cmd.php file is there. Yeah, so let's go ahead and try cmd equals who am I? Perfect. So we've provided a command, it's executed, and sure enough, guys, we were correct. We can move laterally to another user and see if we can escalate from there. Probably hear my stomach grumbling. I do apologize. I have not yet had lunch, but we're gonna push through it. So, Craft Apache. So, how are we going to get a shell? How are we going to get a shell from this point? We have command execution on the target machine. We want a shell in essence as Apache. So, if you were thinking that we could essentially use PowerShell here, right? And in essence transfer over our offsec.ps1 file again and then have it execute there, you're entirely correct. But there's something I want to show you. If we type on, who am I /all, let's take a look at this in closer detail. Guys, this is like pseudo checks or something when we check for our extended privileges and capabilities over the machine. If we tack on -all or /all, we notice we have set impersonation privilege, and that's enabled. So if you've done any Windows ESC in the past, we already have. I mean, we're set. That's game set match. So what we're going to do is utilize something called print spoofer, or print spoofer, and I'll say like GitHub. Here it is, print spoofer, abusing impersonation privileges or impersonation tokens. So there we are. This is basically the whole solution. See the .sln file. We could compile that, but thankfully, people have pretty much already done that. Let's see what we would need to do. -c cmd. Yep. Okay, so everything is pretty standard here. What we're going to do is try and find a binary with our Googling skills. We're going to say print spoofer GitHub, let's say this time 64-bit. Maybe exe, there we go. No, it's not here. Say print spoofer, what we want. Let's look for the exact name. Print spoofer 64.exe on GitHub. Aha! So we got it. It was under releases is what it was. But nonetheless, we could just copy this. So we're going to need to definitely copy this link. And we're going to go to our attacking machine and we're going to type wget and we're just going to pull it down to this directory. Here's our print spoofer 64.exe. And if everything goes as planned, we can achieve privilege escalation through print spoofer. So we've got it on our target machine. The next objective is going to be to transfer it to, well, you guessed it, the target machine, which is, ipconfig. It's going to be this address. I'm just going to note this down. So let's go ahead and move on. recall that we can, moving on, I mean, we can recall that we have Apache here and we need it to execute here. So as tempting as it is to execute and just transfer it, we're actually just going to need to, exit this. We're going to lose our shell. That's okay. But what we're going to do is grab this URI here and boom, copy that. What we can do is just curl. We don't even have to go into the web browser. Let's say like who am I /all. Let's say %20. URL encoding. Oh, no, it works. So there it is. And it's straight from our terminal. What I'm going to do is we're going to need an extra terminal for this. I'm just going to open this up and we're going to have netcat listening verbose on 9090. This is just for when we're ready to receive the shell, basically. Hope that makes sense. And what we're going to do is use this curl command and we're going to say, just as we did before, PowerShell. Actually, we're going to say, we're going to need a URL encoder. That will make this a lot better. I use MayorWeb URL encode decode. And I'm just going to copy our URI here and we're going to need to encode this. So I'm going to bump this side. This I can bump up. CMD is going to be, that's HTTP by the way. CMD is going to be CMD, or we could just say PowerShell, IWR, and we could go HTTP and we're going to need our IP address. So let's bump out of this, if config on ton 0. And we're just transferring it. That's all we're doing. We're just transferring it using PowerShell again, the same way we've been doing. On port 80, except this time we're going to get print spoofer 64.exe. We're going to dash output that to C, Windows, tasks, and I'll put that as print spoofer 64.exe. I'm going to just encode this portion of our command. We're going to encode that. We're going to copy it. And back on the command line, we're going to curl it. Except instead of who am I, we're just going to curl this. And we're going to need that simple HTTP server up. So python-m simple HTTP server on port 80. And let's see if we get lucky here. Remember, and just to recap, the reason we did cmd.php is because we know it's running laterally as the Apache user. And further than that, from our web shell enumeration, we gathered with just a who am I /all that set impersonation privilege token was enabled. So we're going to transfer this bit of a potato executable, and we're going to put it to a known writable location, and then we're going to call on it. But let's transfer it over first. Put HTTP here and specify port 80. And let's go. There it is. Perfect. So it got it. That's a 200 OK. And it placed it in C Windows tasks print spoofer 64.exe. I think we're moving somewhere. Now we're going to need that print spoofer 64 to execute something as NT system authority, and we need whatever it executes as NT system authority, we need that to be our reverse shell. Good news is we still have, we're going to keep, I guess my point is that's why we're going to keep the simple HTTP server running in a terminal and have our listener ready in another terminal. I'm going to exit out of this just to clean things up there. And the next command that we're going to want to execute is going to be C Windows tasks, and we're going to execute print spoofer 64.exe. And what we're going to do is basically specify, okay, we want the command to be cmd, that is command.exe /command PowerShell with the file we're going to be executing, which is still present. Mind you, actually, we don't even need this. Now that I think about it, we don't even need that simple HTTP server. It's already transferred. It's already there. So we're going to go to C, Windows, Tasks, and just say offsec.ps1. Now I'm going to copy this because we're going to need to URL encode our payload here. We're going to copy this. I'm just going to go back to MayorWeb, honestly, and encode it. And let's go up with our up arrow to our curl, all the way back to the CMD, and we're going to paste this in. Now the idea here is that it's going to execute C Windows task print spoofer 64.exe as Apache, which has the impersonation privilege token set, and because of that, we're going to be able to move vertically to NT system authority with the command executing PowerShell of Windows tasks offsec.ps1. PS1 is going to contain a PowerShell reverse shell payload, which should come back then as NT system authority. So we're going to pull this up, drum roll. Watch, it's not going to work or something. Oh my god. I think it did. If we cd here, who am I? That's NT authority system, guys. So that's awesome. We now have complete and total control over this machine, and that's going to make pretty much for craft. Now what we're going to do, now that we have this privilege, is we're going to go to users. Let's go to the administrator. Admin, if I could type today, administrator, and we're going to go to the desktop. There's our proof file, right? So you type out the proof file. We're going to do an IP config though, and type hostname, and who am I to evaluate our privilege. Shift print screen for me, and I'm going to snip this little area. And this would be used as evidence and proof in your formal report, guys. But with that being said, thank you so much for following along with me. I just want to pull one thing up. If we go to offensivesecurity.com, we have 2 new courses, the SOC 200 and the Web 200. I'm proud of very much both of these, but I did have a hand in the Web 200, as many of you know already. And we're very excited about it, with a lot of stuff that is still on the way with the Web 200 and the SOC 200. So always check that out. Check out the events. And yeah. But with no further ado, guys, thank you very much for being here. I have confirmed for the community that myself and FalconSpy will be back on twitch.tv in Q1 of 2022. That may not be immediately out of the gate. You know, everyone's coming back from New Year's and such and so on. We want to give people a little bit of time. But that is the plan. So we're excited. I'm going to keep uploading every week until we move back to Twitch. But these will, again, be live streams over twitch.tv. No worries there. So thank you guys very much for all the positive support and all the positive words. And we always encourage you to try harder. Take care.